Okay, good evening, everyone. So in the last class, we completed the Route 53, right? Okay, so today we will go with another service called Relational Database Service. And we call that as RDS. So by seeing this name, we can identify that this RDS service might provide you some kind of a database, right? So that's true. RDS service will provide you the SQL databases. Generally, you have a requirement to create one database. You have a requirement to maintain a database. Let us say you are learning a database. Let us say it can be MySQL or Oracle, whatever it is. So what exactly we have to do for that? First, we have to purchase one server, right? And here you will get the CPU and you will get a RAM. On top of that, you will get the storage. This is what you will get whenever you purchase a computer. Then you have to decide what operating system we need, right? And along with the operating system, what you have to do is you have to configure the operating system and the configuration. At the time of installing the operating system, we will configure, right? And then you have to download the software, like database software, to be installed by yourself, right? You're responsible to install the database software, and then you're responsible to create the database and all the things. So this particular database you are going to use for your applications or for your learning purpose. In this example, everything is your responsibility, right? Including the power supply of your laptop or desktop or server, and to maintain the hardware, and to maintain the operating system, installing the database software, configuring the database software, and making the database instance, the database software to be up and running. Everything is your responsibility, right? What if you are going to use the service called RDS? In this RDS, everything will be provided to you by Amazon itself. RDS is AWS maintained database service in which you will get your actual database instance. In the database instance, you can create your database like my first database or my second database, whatever it is. While creating, you can select how many CPUs you need and how much RAM you need. And to maintain the database up and running, Amazon will take care of all the requirements. You are not responsible for anything other than whatever the data you are going to store into the database software. To use a database, you have to install the software, right? But here, Amazon will maintain everything and they will provide you the required database to you. So keeping this aside, what are the different types of databases available in the market? Different types of or different categories, whatever it is. Have you ever heard about like SQL database? And the other type is NoSQL database, right? Keeping these types aside, what are the different categories of databases? Different categories. Have you ever heard about OLTP and OLAP? I think you might, you never heard about these things. Whatever the databases we use, 90% those are OLTP type of a databases. That stands for online transactional processing. Online transactional processing. So if you are maintaining some kind of web application or a website, so if they require a database, you have to use the OLTP type. OLAP stands for online analytical processing. So these type of databases are used for data analysis. The best example is data warehousing. Whenever you do some kind of data warehousing, they will use OLAP. Other than the data warehousing, all other databases will be under online transactional processing category, OLTP. So we use Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, or a PostgreSQL, any kind of databases or OLTP. Okay, so now here coming to this RDS, what type of database they will provide and what category of databases they will provide you using this RDS. Using this RDS, whatever the databases Amazon is providing, those are OLTP kind of a databases, online transactional processing, and they will provide SQL databases only. They don't provide any NoSQL database using the RDS. Under the RDS service, you will get only the SQL databases. Right now, or as of now, Amazon is providing 6 different types of database engines under the RDS category. Amazon is providing 6 different types of database engines. What is the database engine means? What is the database engine? What is the database engine? Or what are the different types of database engines you know? Okay, so just I will give you a simple example. MySQL is one database engine. Oracle is another database engine. Microsoft SQL Server is another database engine. Every different database software is a different type of database engine. So like that, Amazon is providing you 6 different types of database engines. In our regular terms, we can say that 6 different types of database softwares are available under RDS. But the technical term is database engine. So relational database service or SQL databases, both are same. The technical term is relational database. Have you ever heard about like RDBMS? Relational database management service. Like if you are from computers background in the graduation, I think you might have a subject on that, right? DBMS. So RDBMS is nothing but the SQL databases, relational database management service, which is nothing but the SQL databases. And here we are not doing any database administration or anything, because that is the responsibility of the database administrators. Then what is our responsibility? Our responsibility is to create the database instance and create the database, so that the database administrators will create all the tables, they will maintain all the data, they will configure with the applications or whatever it is. From that, our job is to maintain the database up and running, like high availability, backups is our priority, and to maintain the high performance. All these instance level things are our job. Even if we are creating EC2 instances, right? What is our job? Only to maintain the EC2 instance. We don't care about like what applications are running or what softwares are running in the EC2 instance. Because for those applications, there will be a separate team. They might call it as a services team or application team. Okay, right. So here, coming to the databases, first we need to know database. What is the use of a database? In general, what is the use of a database? Or what is the purpose of the database? If I say to store the data, is that the correct definition of the database? Because I can use a pen drive also to store a data, like storage drive. Then what is the use of the relational or database, a regular database? In a database, the database will be stored in a systematic way with respect to like tables and all the things. Based on the category, they can create all the data in a systematic way. Let us say you would like to maintain some student information. So they will create multiple rows, multiple columns, right? One column will be like a roll number, student name, class. In that way, the data will be stored in a systematic way, or we can say in an ordered format. But in the databases, we have different types of databases, SQL database and NoSQL database. And we have 2 categories of databases available. One is a OLTP and the second one is a OLAP. Okay. So coming to this, databases are available in 2 categories. One is OLTP, which stands for online transactional processing. And the second one is OLAP, online analytical processing. So this online analytical processing is a kind of a data warehousing tool which can be used for data analysis. OLTP type of a databases are only used in data warehousing. OLTP, like a regular databases, or fall into the OLTP category. It can be a SQL database or it can be a NoSQL database, that doesn't matter. All other databases are into the OLTP. And then we have two different types, right? SQL databases and NoSQL databases. By using this RDS, RDS will provide 6 different SQL database engines. Database engine is nothing but a database version, like MySQL is one, Oracle is the second one. Like that, they will provide you 6 different types of databases. Let me list out all the databases first, then we can see like how to create and how to maintain all the things. The first one is a MySQL, PostgreSQL, MariaDB, and the fourth one is Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, and the sixth one is Aurora. I think you never heard about like Aurora database. I guess you might heard about all other 5 database engines. You might you might don't know like what exactly it is, but you might somewhere heard about these database engines. Coming to all these, the first 3 are open source or community edition databases. What is the meaning of an open source or community edition? There is no licensing for those databases. No need to purchase the database software or no need to pay any licensing charges for the database. The same way with the Microsoft operating system, like a Windows operating system and like Ubuntu operating system. If you are using Ubuntu, it is free to download and you can use it without purchasing the license. But for Windows, you have to pay the license and you have to purchase the operating system. In the same way, the selected first 3 database engines are available at free of cost. No need to pay any amount for using the database, but you will be charged for the resources like storage, CPU, RAM, and all the things. Okay, right. So for what about the 4th and 5th one, Oracle and Microsoft SQL? Definitely they are licensed. Like you have to pay the money for using the database software. And Amazon supports 2 different types of licensing models. RDS supports 2 different types of licensing models. The first one is license included, and the second one is BYOL. Do you know what is a BYOL? Do you know the full form of BYOL? Bring your own license. Bring your own license. That is the full form of BYOL. Let us say if you are creating any of the first 3, there is no point of license. No need to worry about like from where to get the license. Does AWS provide or we have to purchase? There is no point of that. But whenever you go for the 4th and 5th ones, like Oracle or Microsoft SQL, it requires a license, and Amazon will offer 2 different types of licensing models. Let us say for a server, assume that for every hour for Oracle database, for every 1 hour, assume that AWS is going to charge $1. If you select the license model as license included, they will charge $1 plus licensing cost for every hour, like 1.1 or 1.2. No need to pay separately, like no need to buy the license separately. Then what is the bring your own license is, if you select the bring your own license, Amazon will not charge any licensing cost from you. Instead, you have to go to Oracle or Microsoft SQL Server and you have to purchase the license on your own, and you have to provide that license with AWS so that the license will be installed with your database instance. Those are the two different things. And the bring your own license or license included are applicable for Oracle and Microsoft SQL Server, because those two are licensed softwares. And coming to the Aurora database is Amazon's proprietary database engine, because here we have a MySQL and PostgreSQL, right? Those are open source. What Amazon did is they took that open source databases and they modified that and they built their own database called Aurora. This Aurora database is available in two different flavors. Like one is MySQL compatible and the second one is a PostgreSQL compatible. Let us say if your application requires MySQL database, then obviously you have to create MySQL only, right? But Amazon will provide you the same MySQL compatible database using the Aurora, because Amazon wants to promote their own database engine. That's why Aurora is available at free of cost. I mean, according to the license, there is no licensing cost, and they will offer you high performance with respect to the MySQL and PostgreSQL. We will separately discuss about the Aurora. Okay, so coming to the first 5 database engines, every database engine will work in the same way in terms of creation, maintenance, backup creation, and all the things. There is no difference from architect side. Whenever they ask you to create a database, which type of database engine we have to create? Let us say your organization requires one database. So they will say that we need one database, create a database. So with which database engine you have to create the database, and how many CPUs you have to select, how much RAM you have to allocate, and how much storage you have to provide. We don't select all those things. We don't decide all those things. First, whenever the person requested to create a database, they will provide you the use case. So the database is required for so-and-so application. So whenever that application was designed, it will be compatible with a specific database only. No application will support all the databases. While the design, the developers decide with which database the application to be working. So they will mention that what is the database engine required for that application. And at the same time, they will provide you with how many CPUs and how much RAM the database to be created. And storage, they will provide you like 100 GB, 500 GB, that depends on the requirement. Our job is to create the database, and we need to configure the automated backups, manual backups, and everything. Because if something went wrong and if the database administrator is unable to recover the data, we will use the snapshot to restore that entire database instance to the working condition. And whenever we are trying to create a database, the database instances can be created. Okay, so here I am using 2 different terms. One is I'm using a database instance. I'm using 2 different terms. One is a database instance, and the second one is a database, right? What is the difference between the database instance and database? What is the difference between the database instance and database? Both are different, not same. What is the difference? Okay, so here I have a laptop, right? If I download Oracle database software and if I install the Oracle here, then what is the database and what is the database instance? I can consider my laptop as a database instance. What is the database? After you install the database software, we will create one database and we will give a name to the database, right? That is what exactly the database. The data will be stored into the database using the tables. Database instance means your computer name. So this entire thing is called as a database instance. My computer will have some name, right? If you go to my computer properties, you can see some name. That is what my computer's host name. That is called as database instance name in the AWS RDS. Database name is the actual database in which the data is going to be stored. Don't get confused with database instance and the database. Okay, right. So here, at the time of creating the database, there are two different types of deployment models available. There are two different types of deployment models available. RDS supports two different deployment models for the database instance creation. I think now they are providing three different modes, but let us start with two. And in that two, we will, what we call that, we will discuss about the subtypes. The first one is single AZ deployment. And the second one is multi-AZ deployment. One is a single AZ deployment and the second one is a multi-AZ deployment. Again, in the multi-AZ deployment, we have two different subtypes. Like one is a multi-AZ instance and multi-AZ cluster that we can see at the time of discussing the multi-AZ deployment. Now we will go with the single AZ deployment. What might be the meaning of a single AZ deployment? So whatever the database you create, the database will be created and maintained in a single availability zone, which doesn't support high availability. Like if you create a load balancer, it requires minimum 2 instances, right? What we have done, we created the instances across two different availability zones to maintain the high availability. If you create both instances in the same availability zone, high availability is not possible. Because if that availability zone goes down, you can observe few minutes of downtime because Amazon will take some time to make the database to be up and running from a different availability zone. So that is the drawback or challenge with the single AZ deployment. So now what we do is, let us try to create one database, or we can say database instance. And while creating, we will observe the different options available for the database instances. Create a RDS instance in Northern Virginia region using the below details. So already we mentioned that it is going to be created in the Northern Virginia region. Then we have to select the availability zone, right? So for that, what I do is deployment mode. I will say single AZ and I will select US East 1A. Okay. So then what else we need to create a database? What exactly we need? It requires an instance type, right? Like CPU and RAM. So in the database instances also, we have to select the resources using the instance type. But in the EC2, we got like t2.micro, right? But here you will get something like db.t2.micro, some kind of a thing. So what I do is I will select micro instance in which we will get 1 CPU and 1 GB of RAM. It should be like db.t2.micro because that is a free tier eligible. And then we need the storage also, right? Because with the instance type, what you get is CPU, RAM, and network, right? These are the things you will get with the instance type. And every database requires storage also. I will go with 20 GB. I will go with 20 GB size. I will tell you the reason behind why we are selecting 20 GB, why not like 10 GB or why not 5 GB. And then the storage type. What type of storage you need? General purpose SSD or a provisioned IOPS, right? We have different types out there, EBS volume types, GP2, GP3, IO1, IO2. So you have to select the type also. I will go with general purpose. I will go with general purpose SSD. And for this 20 GB, Amazon is providing some kind of a feature called storage auto scaling. Storage auto scaling. What is the meaning of an auto scaling? So already we covered the auto scaling part, right? What is the use of auto scaling? With respect to the EC2 instances. So whenever there is a requirement, a new instance will be created. Whenever there is no requirement, existing instance will be deleted. But always, even there is no load, minimum number of EC2 instances will be running. But with respect to the storage, the size cannot be reduced. So here initially we are selecting with 20 GB, right? After a few days, if the 20 GB is getting filled up like with 100%, automatically the 20 GB will be increased by 10% every time. 20 GB will become 22, 22 will become 25, then 25 will become 28, then 31. Automatically the storage will be increased, but the storage cannot be reduced. Storage cannot be reduced. The storage auto scaling will allow the storage to be increased automatically whenever the capacity is filled up to 90%, sorry, 80%. Whenever the storage is 18 GB filled up already, only 2 GB is left, then automatically it will be increased by 10%. 10% means out of 20, 10 means 2 GB, right? The 20 GB will become 22. Again, if 80% got filled up, then the 22, 10%, right? What is that? 2.4. So that will be rounded off to the 3 GB and 22 will become 25 GB. So it will keep on increasing up to something. What is that? That you have to select. You can select 100 GB, you can select 500 GB, you can select 1000 GB. You have to select the maximum value up to that particular GB. The storage will be automatically increased depending on the requirement. And the storage size will never be reduced, which is not possible. And then always the backups are important, right? Let us enable automated snapshots. Enable with, let us say 7 days retention period. What is the meaning of this 7 days retention period? The backups will be maintained for 7 days. Whenever a backup is more than 7 days older, automatically the backup will be deleted from that particular database backups. There is no use of maintaining the backups for 100 days or 1000 days, right? And then what else? What else might be required to create a database? Does it require any key pair? Okay, so instance wise, these are the different things, right? Now coming to the database. So database instance name, I will say my first database instance. This will be the name of the instance. In the database instance, we are going to create the database. I will say my first DB. This is the actual database in which we are going to store all the data. This is the actual database in which we are going to store all the data. And the database requires a master username, like admin username. By default, the username is admin, and you can modify that username. You can change that username. And this requires a password. Once the database got created, the database will be logged in using the username and password. So password we can assign. We can assign the password, or you can set auto-generated option also. That's why to create a database, key pair is not required. Key pair is not required to create RDS instance. And do we need a security group? Yes, we need a security group. What is the port number we have to open? What is the port number we have to open? RDP, why? Okay, RDP, what is the use of RDP? To log into the Windows server, right? Did I mention that we are creating Windows server, Linux server? You cannot log into the database instance which is running in the backend. You cannot log into the server because that is Amazon managed service. Amazon will maintain the physical server. Amazon will maintain the operating system. Amazon will install the database software. Just we are using the database. You cannot log into the backend servers. Only you can log into your database instance. So you have to know that on which port the database is running, right? So MySQL, if it is a, okay, even the first important thing, we missed that database engine, right? Database engine, MySQL, or otherwise which database software you will get, right? We will go with MySQL. So first we have to know that on which port number the MySQL database is going to run. Any idea what is the port number? SSH. SSH is Linux, right? SSH is for Linux. What is SSH first? SSH is a service, secure shell service. The secure shell service will run on 22 port. Is it a secure shell service? That's a MySQL service. So MySQL will use a 3306 port. The port number will be 3306. No need to remember the ports. In a security group, if you select MySQL from the drop down, automatically the port number will be generated. You can remember that you have to open MySQL port, MySQL protocol. If it is for Oracle database, then that might be a different port number. If it is a PostgreSQL, I think that will run on 5432 port number. So you cannot remember all the ports, right? So you have to know that you have to open the MySQL port. Let me open MySQL port from anywhere so that we can access that database from anywhere. And then access type of the database, I will select as public. There are two options. One is a public and the other is a private. If you create the database with, I think this is not access type, connectivity type. That is the actual term. Connectivity type. If you select public, the database can be accessible from anywhere across the globe. If you select it private, the database is only accessible from that VPC. I think in our VPC, we have a public and private subnet, right? If you would like to create a database in the private subnet, you have to select the connectivity type as a private, so that the web application which is running in the public subnet is able to communicate with the database. Then how can we log into the database? We can use the Bastion host. You can log into the Bastion host and from there you can access that. But initially, I will create the database as a public type so that we can access the database from my laptop or from anywhere across the globe. So now let us try to create a database with these details. And while creating, if you see or if you came across some different options, we can understand about those options also. Okay, just give me a second. So log into your Amazon account and in the search box, type RDS. You can see which is a managed relational database service. The database service will be maintained and managed by AWS and just we are using the service. So click on the RDS. So you can see there are 0 database instances running right now. On the left side, if you click on the databases, you can see there are no instances found. So to create the database, you have to click on create database. And before that, let me go to the automated snap backups here. Can you see any backup here? No. And if you go to snapshots, can you see any here? No. Everything is empty, right? There is no database and everything. Public means the snapshots maintained by anybody, like public snapshots, like your AMIs. But in the manual and automated, we can't see any, right? 0 backups are there because we are creating the database for the first time. Okay, now click on databases. Click on create database. Then you will be taken to this page. So here there are 2 different options, standard create and easy create. What might be the difference between these two? In the standard create, you are going to select all the configuration options like backup retention period and instance type and everything. If you select the easy create, it will use the recommended best practice configuration. Automatically, it will pick the recommended configuration and your database will be created. So what is the recommended one to select? Standard create, because Amazon cannot guess what is my requirement, right? Always we will use the standard create option. And these are the 6 different types of database engines available under the RDS. MySQL, MariaDB, Microsoft SQL, Oracle, and PostgreSQL. So here, if I select MySQL, and you can see the edition as MySQL community. Will you be able to see any kind of license related option here? No. If I go to Oracle, and you can see license as bring your own license. So you have to provide the license. What if I select standard edition? Here they will give you 2 different options. You can select bring your own license or you can use license included. And what if I select Microsoft SQL Server? This is also a licensed version and the license will be included and the total cost will be database instance cost plus the license cost. These 2 are not free. These are paid. And if you select the MySQL, because our goal is to create a MySQL database, and the edition is a single edition, which is a MySQL community edition. But you will have different versions. Like if you are creating the Windows EC2 instance, you will have a Microsoft Windows Server 2016, 2019, and 2022. Depending on the requirement, you can select the OS version, like Windows 7, Windows 10, and Windows 11. So depending on your application requirement, you can select any of the version from the drop-down list. These are the different database versions available under MySQL. Different applications will have a different requirements. According to the requirement, you can select any version here. I will go with the default one, which is 8.0.28. 8.0.28. And then what is the next option? Template. What is the meaning of a template? Generally, what is the meaning of a template? Some predefined set of configurations, right? Okay. By default, what is the template selected? Production. So keep that production on. But anyways, we are not going to create with that production. What is the deployment option selected? Multi-AZDB. Because for the production, high availability is required. That's why by default, the multi-AZDB instance will be selected. But you can change this also. That doesn't matter. What if I select dev or test? Single DB instance got selected. And all the options will be selected like what we call that, the recommended options for the development or test instance. Then what will be this free tier? See here, all options got disabled. By default, the single DB instance got selected. That means multi-AG is not eligible for free tier. And in the settings, you can see instance type, instance class also, you cannot select any other thing other than like micro, t2.micro and t3.micro, because those are free tier eligible. You cannot select any other things. But anyways, what I do is I don't select free tier because we have a limited configuration options. I will select a dev or test. I will select a dev or test so that we can modify all the required options. But anyways, we will select all free tier eligible options only. Even you can select the production and you can modify all the values. That doesn't matter. Okay. Any template you can select, but the important thing is the configuration part. It is like a predefined configuration. If you select production, automatically the production related configuration will be selected. So it is recommended to select a dev or test. Under the templates, select dev or test. And under the deployment options, select a single DB instance. Your database instance will be created as a single with no standby DB instance. There will be no standby instance to provide the service in case of failure of the primary database. So high availability is not possible using the single DB instance. Then the database instance identifier, which is nothing but the database name. So what is the name we decided? This is the one, right? My first database instance. Let me type some name. And then the master username, which is the administrator user. By default, the username is admin, and you can change the username also. Like you can change that username to any name, whatever you would like to have, or you can keep the default username also. And the username you have to remember if you modify. Even though if you don't remember, you can easily get that username from the details. And coming to the password, you can select the password, this one, auto generate password, so that Amazon will generate the password, or you can use your own password also. But remember, the password should not contain slash, it should not contain single quote, double quote, and @ because those will be used in the SQL queries. That's why you have to avoid these characters. So always it is recommended to use some uppercase, lowercase, and number. So let me enter a password. Then we have to configure the instance. And remember, by default, m6g.large has been selected. By default, m6g.large. I think I clicked on somewhere. Yeah, this is the one which will be selected by default, which will get 4 CPU and 16 GB of RAM, which is not a free tier eligible. That is not free tier eligible. So we have to change that to the free tier eligible, which is t2.micro. Wait, sorry. So let me type t2.micro. So to get the T2, you have to select the burstable classes here. In the standard classes, you will get M, not T. The T classes will be available under burstable classes. Select the burstable classes, and automatically t3.micro will be selected. t2.micro and t3.micro, both are free tier eligible. But don't select medium or something else. You can go with any instance class according to the requirement. But now here I will select t3.micro. But you can't see t2.micro here, right? You can't see t2. Why? Because there is a previous generation. If you would like to select t2.micro, you have to turn on this button. Then you can see t2.micro also. Why should I go for t2.micro? Because in the T3, I am getting 2 CPU and 1 GB of RAM. Whereas in the t2.micro, we will get 1 CPU and 1 GB of RAM. Okay. Then the storage. What is the requirement we have? General purpose SSD. So you have to select GP2. but it supports GP2, IO1 and magnetic. The storage type supports GP2, IO1 and magnetic. In IO1, you will get more IOPS. In the GP2, you will get a fixed IOPS, whereas the magnetic has a limited IOPS, which is not recommended for even for production or for development instances also. Let me select general purpose only. And the allocated storage, we have to start from 20 GB minimum if the storage type is general purpose SSD. What if the storage type is provisioned IOPS? The minimum will be changed, which is 100 GB is the minimum. If you select IO1, the minimum size of the hard storage should be 100. If it is a GP2, then the minimum size will be 20, maximum will be the same, 16 terabytes. And then storage auto scale. By selecting this checkbox, you can enable storage auto scaling. By enabling this feature, it will allow the storage to increase after the specified threshold is exceeded. And if you select 1000, then the 20 GB will be automatically increased up to 1000 GB whenever the hard disk is getting filled up by 90%. Okay, right. So then you have to select the VPC, in which VPC you would like to create. Go with the default VPC and try with new VPC, whatever the custom VPC you created. Definitely you will get an error, and try to understand why you are getting the error. Okay, just if you read the error message, you can understand the reason behind why you are unable to create the database in the custom VPC. Okay, but before closing the database, I will explain why we were unable to and what we have to do to create the database also. But in the meanwhile, you guys can try to create the database in the custom VPC and try to resolve that issue. Okay, and then subnet group, keep that leave default. Public access, yes. What if you select yes? The database instance will be accessible by your EC2 instances within the VPC, and the database also accessible from outside of the VPC also. That means from your house or from your office and all the things. If you select no, only your Amazon EC2 instances in that VPC are able to communicate with database. So public access means the database can be accessible from anywhere. So security group. By default, the default security group will be selected, which is of no use to access from outside. So remove that. Do we have any existing security group which will allow the database traffic? We don't have any right now, right? So here you can see Windows RDP and Linux SSH, which is of no use. Select create new. Select create new and give a name MySQL. Give any name, that doesn't matter. Availability zone. I would like to create that in 1A availability zone. And here additional configuration is there, right? If you click on that, the 3306 port will be opened from the security group, because your database is going to run on 3306 port. Your database will run on 3306 port, and the same will be opened from MySQL. I mean, in the security group to allow the traffic. And then the database authentication option, select the password authentication. Scroll down, and here there is one. As of now, have you selected any name for your database? We haven't selected, right? We are supposed to give my first DB as a database name, and we have to select automated backups, right? Retention period to be 7 days. That configuration we have to select in the additional configuration. Select the additional configuration. In the database options, you can give some name, my first DB. This is what my database name to be. If you don't specify any name, RDS will not create any database. You have to create the database manually. Then just scroll down. By default, automated backups will be enabled. By default, automated backups will be enabled with default retention period as 7 days. So what is the meaning of 0 if I select? 0 means there will be no backups maintained. And what is the maximum number of days we can set the retention period? 7, we selected default. The maximum is 35 days. Maximum is 35 days. That means the 35 days older backups will be maintained. Whenever the backup is more than 35 days older, the backup will be deleted. So now let us go with 7 days. And when this backup to be created, you have to select a time, right? So for that, under the backup window, you have to select a choose a window. I would like to create the backup at every day 6:30 a.m. India time. And this time is UTC. What is the India time zone? UTC plus 5:30, right? If I select start time as 1 a.m., what is the India time? 6:30. That is my requirement. So select 1 a.m. Duration, you can keep that as is. So within half an hour, the backup job will be completed. Between 1 to 1:30, the backup job will be completed. If you feel that it requires more time, select 1 hour. Like if the database is big enough, then you can go with 1 hour also. Then just scroll down. If you want to enable encryption for the database, you can. Or if you want to disable, you can disable it also. And the monitoring, there are 2 different monitorings available, enhanced monitoring and what we call that? Basic monitoring. Enhanced monitoring will cost you some extra charges, and a basic monitoring will be available at free of cost. The difference is in the basic monitoring, the metrics will be monitored for every 5 minutes. Whereas in the detailed monitoring or enhanced monitoring, you can monitor for every 1 second or every 10 seconds like that. That is the advantage of, That is the advantage of enhanced monitoring. Generally, whenever you are doing like something called production deployment, always we will enable enhanced monitoring. But here also you can enable, that doesn't matter, or you can disable it so that you will get only a basic monitoring. Then log exports. Every database will have some kind of a log files, right? You have to select all the log files so that if something is not working properly, by opening these log files, you can understand what exactly happening in your database. Is there any errors or is there any performance got slowed down? What is the reason? Everything will be available in these logs. Then just scroll down. Always we will disable this auto minor version upgrade. What is the meaning of that? If there is a new version of the database available, the minor version, like we selected 8.0.20, right? If the new version like 8.0.21 is available, automatically your database will be upgraded. But sometimes your application might not be compatible with the newer version of the database, right? Generally that won't happen. But if it is not compatible, then your application won't work. That's why we never enable automatic upgrades of any softwares or any versions. So disable that one. And maintenance window. So if you enable this auto minor version upgrade, the upgrade will be happening in the maintenance window. You can select a maintenance window, like only during the Sundays or Saturday. Like let us say you can select evening 6 p.m. and 3 hours. Like every Saturday at 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. will be the maintenance time. Like 11:30 to 2:30 or something in India time. You can select that. If there is any maintenance activities from Amazon side, they will be done during this time. And whatever the options we have selected, for those options, this is the estimated monthly cost. But we selected T2.micro, right? Then why these charges? If my account is not free tier eligible, then I will be charged $14.71 per month. If my account is free tier eligible, then I don't get this charge for T2.micro, and I don't get these charges for 20 GB of the storage also, because up to 30 GB, the free tier eligible, right? So you don't get any charges if you create with these options using the single AZ deployment. And here you can see deletion production, right? What is this? If you select this checkbox, the database instance cannot be deleted. Okay, let me select that so that I can show you. And click on create database, and the database will be created. And this database creation process will take like 5 to 10 minutes because it has to create a lot of things in the backend, right? So definitely you have to wait minimum 5 minutes. And if we create multi-AZ deployment, that will take minimum 10 to 15 minutes. And one more thing here is, whenever the database is getting created, initially Amazon will create one default snapshot. So do we get any data into this particular database? No, zero data, right? Only database got created with 0 tables and with 0 data. But still, Amazon will create an automated snapshot, automated backup of this particular newly created database instance. So here we can write down like RDS will create a backup for the newly created database instance at the time of creation. At the time of creation, there's a default behavior, but there is no use of that. I mean, with respect to the data and all the things. But the reason behind that is AWS will support point-in-time recovery concept generally. Okay, so if you create the database today, when will be the first backup will be created, like first snapshot of your database instance? As per the configuration, the very first database snapshot will takes place tomorrow 6:30 a.m., right? So what about the data which we stored before 6:30 a.m. from now onwards? That will not be included in any backup, right? If something went wrong at 12 p.m. midnight, 12 midnight or 2 a.m. tomorrow morning, so we don't have any backups, right? That's why whenever a database got created, immediately it will create a backup. Whenever you store something into the database, that will be maintained as a backup using some point-in-time recovery. That point-in-time recovery we can discuss in a separate session. I mean, after completing this creation, we will go to the backups, snapshot, recovery, manual snapshots. At that time, we will discuss about point-in-time recovery. Okay. And let me refresh. What is the password we have selected? We assigned, right? We haven't selected auto-generated. Okay. If you select auto-generated password, then you have to click here so that it will display the password. But I haven't selected auto-generated, right? So you know the password, so you can close that particular button. While it is getting created, let me click on this particular database instance identifier so we can see some information. So first thing is, this is the database identifier. Status is creating. Class is t3.micro. And the engine is MySQL Community Database Engine. Region and availability zone. So once the database got created, Amazon will generate one endpoint. That endpoint is the URL which we have to use to connect to the database. Like public IP, we used to log into the Windows instances or Linux instances, right? In the same way, to access the database, you have to use this endpoint. And the endpoint will be generated once the database got created. At the same time, the port will be displayed, like on which port the database is running. And in this VPC, the database is getting created. And this is the security group attached to the database instance. Let me open this security group in a new tab so that we can observe what is the rule created in that particular security group. The security group name is MySQL, right? And if you scroll down, What is the type? MySQL or Aurora. What is the port range? So our database is running on that. Can you guess what might be the source? After that, you can see source, right? What might be the source? Does it select anywhere? It will capture my IP address by default, and the connection will be allowed only from my IP address only. So can I modify this? Yes, you can click on edit inbound rules and just you can remove it and you can select anywhere. So from anywhere across the globe, the database can be accessible. Generally, the problem with the my IP is today you can connect, but by tomorrow, if your home IP address got changed, you cannot access the database. That's why it is better to use anywhere, at least while we are doing the practice and while until you familiar with these security groups and the connectivity. Okay, so then just you can see it is a publicly accessible. Let us say we create the database and we forget the database name, or we forget the username to log in. How to get the username of the database? So here, if you scroll down, here you can see the configuration tab, right? Okay, before that, you can see what is the status now. So we haven't initiated any backup, right? Amazon is creating an initial backup of your database. Okay, so if you click on the configuration tab, you can see the database username here. This is the username of your database. And also you can see the name of the database which we created in the instance also, DB name. Then what about the password? Can we see password? Yes. No, you cannot. Will you be able to see the password of an IAM user? No, the same way. What if I forgot the password of the database? Select the database instance. You can go to modify. You have to click on the modify. And then you can see option called new password. Wait. What is the reason? No. Okay, sorry. It seems I am not getting any option, right? Okay, let me open it again. What might be the reason? So database UI will be slow. Okay, so here I am not getting any option here, right? What is the reason? We enable deletion production. That means you cannot delete the database. That doesn't mean that you cannot modify, right? But the problem here is they are not showing the errors in the red color. This is actually the error message. Database is currently not in modifiable state. That means while the database is not available, the state is not available, you cannot modify the database. Now the status is available, but earlier what was the status? Backing up. Something is happening, right? During that particular time, you cannot modify the database. If the database instance status is not available, you cannot modify the database. Okay, now the status is available. So you can click on modify and you can get all the options where you can change the password of the database. Here you have to enter a new password and then just scroll down, click on continue. Yes. So that a new password will be assigned to your database. Okay. So now let us see how to log in. Log in to the MySQL database instance. So first thing to log in, we need a MySQL client tool. Do you know any tools which is a MySQL client tool? There are n number of tools available. Out of those, one is SQL Yog. I can say community edition, which is free to download and free to use. And there is one more thing called MySQL Workbench. You can use that also. Any kind of a MySQL tool you can use, MySQL client tool. So here, this is the one. We are going to use SQL Yoke Community Edition. I will show you that from where we can download that. And then we need endpoint of the database, username of the database, password of the database. If you have all these four, you can log into the database. And to log into the database must be accessible from the public. If you don't create the database connectivity type as public, you cannot access the database from outside of the VPC. Okay, so from where we can get the endpoint? Okay, first, what is the username? So we selected admin as a password, username, and password. I entered my own password. Now we need to get the endpoint name. Go to your RDS and go to the databases and click on the database name, database instance name. So here you can see this is the endpoint name. This is the endpoint name. But it is nothing but your database instance name dot some random name dot US East 1, which in which region your database is running, dot RDS dot Amazon AWS.com. Okay, let me copy. So now we need to download the MySQL client tool, right? So from where we can download is, you can go to Google. I think there is something called WebYog or something, the official site, and you have to download from the GitHub. You can type SQL Yog Community Edition in the Google. So you can go to this particular URL. I will share that URL also. Sorry. This is the URL from where you can download that edition for free. SQL Yoke Community Edition. And once you go there, you can download any version. Like always, we recommend to download the latest one. If you click on that, it will start downloading, which is 6 MB in size. 6 MB in size. Once it got downloaded, you can install it like how you can install a regular software. Double click, next, install. So the software will be installed. Once it got installed on your desktop, you can see this kind of an icon. So double click on that. You don't get all, like by default, you will get like this. Give me a second. These are all the old connections. Okay. By default, you will get like this. So here you can give some name. I can say my first RDS instance. Any name you can give. Even ABC also you can give. This is for your identification purpose. Click on OK. Then here, the first one, it will ask about MySQL host address. That is the place where you have to enter the endpoint. Address of the database. Where is your database running? The address of the database is nothing but instance identifier. Endpoint. Instance endpoint. Then username. What is the username? Admin. Password. Let me enter the password. Once you enter all the details, you can check the connection also. If you click on the test connection, you should get connection successful. If you don't get this, there might be a problem with the connectivity. Sometimes it might show that wrong password, bad password. That means whatever the password or username which you entered, they are not correct. Once you enter all the details, you can click on connect. And if you would like to save the settings, you can click on yes. So that from the next time onwards, no need to enter the username, password, and all the things. Okay, so here, what is the database we created? My first DB, right? You can see some database here. I don't know like how to increase the size. Okay, anyways, I think I don't see anything here. But here you have a database. If you expand the database, you can see tables, but there is no table available because Amazon don't know like what tables you need, right? Okay. So what I do is let us create some data so that tomorrow we can check the backups. By tomorrow, one automated backup will be created, right? So I can say that create a table under my first DB database and name the table as something like, I can say table name. I can say table name will be students. And then every table requires some columns, right? I would like to maintain the columns like the first one will be serial number, like student numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, name 1, name 2, name 3, and class. All these details I would like to maintain. Then the name, class, or I can say section or something, and then something called like comments. These are the information I would like to maintain in the students table. Okay. So in the serial number, what type of data we will store? Type of the data. Numbers, right? 1, 2, 3 or numbers. So the data type will be numeric. Generally, we don't create all these tables in the real time. That will be the job of the database administrators. But to check the backups, whether they are working or not, we should create some data. That's why we will create some kind of table and we will store the data. Okay. Name contains alphabets. What is the data type of the alphabet? Characters. There's a character itself, but nowadays we are using something called variable character. Yeah, and even numeric, you have to mention the size. If I say the length as a 2, that means it supports up to the number 99. If you select 3, it supports number up to 999. Okay, let me go with 2. And the name data type will be variable character. And the name length should be 25. That means maximum length of the name should be 25. So class is also like a numeric, like I would like to mention like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 10. So I will say 2. Section, that will be the variable character because I will use ABC kind of a thing. 1. So up to A to Z, 1 character. Comments will be variable character. And I can say 100. You can use up to 100 characters in length. This is how we are going to create our first table. We are going to create our first table and we will store 5 entries. Then create data into the table. Like let us say 5 entries. Like student 1, student 2, student 3, like that. We will create some 5 entries of data. Information about 5 students. So that by tomorrow, whenever a backup got created tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m., that backup contains 5 entries of data. Okay. So now let us go with this table. Open this SQL Yoke community, connect to the database, expand the plus symbol against your database name. Right click on the tables, click on create table. We don't use any queries or something. We are using everything as a graphical user interface where you can type everything manually. No need to write any commands or queries. Table name, students, what we have decided? Students, yeah. Table name is students. And the students table will be created in the My First DB. So here you have to design columns. How many columns you need? So what is the first column name? Serial number. And the data type you have to select from the drop down. What is the data type? Numeric. Select the numeric. Length should be 2. Then the second column, name, which should be variable character. Length 25 I selected, right? Okay. Then the next one is class, which is a numeric 2. Then something like section, which is a variable character 1. Then final one is comments, which is a variable character, and let us say 100. Once you type all the columns, at the bottom right corner, click on save. Then you will get a message like table created successfully. Do you want to create more tables? I don't want to create any tables. Click on no. Done. And on the left side, you can see a table called students under the tables. So right click on the students table and click on open table. So here you can see the table with 0 data, right? Generally, what database administrators will do is they will use the queries to create the tables. They will use the queries to update the tables also. So here I'm going to enter the details. Just select that column 1. Name will be, I will say student 1. You can write any name. Class, I can say 1, section A, comment, some random comment. 2, student 2, 1, some random comments. I will enter total 5 details. So totally I entered 5 student details. So here you can see something called some save button, right? Floppy disk kind of a symbol, which is highlighted in blue color, right? That means the data is not yet saved. You have to click on this icon so that the data will be saved. Now your database contains a table called students, and the students table contain 5 entries of the data. So in the next session, what we do is we will delete some table data and we will use the backup, which is about to create tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. And we will check that is that backup is able to restore all the data or not. Only to check the backups, automated snapshots and manual snapshots, we are creating these details. Generally, the tables, data, everything will be created using some automated scripts. They will provide you the script. You have to run that and the table will be created. And the data, application will load the data. Application will create all the data. Application will read the data. We don't create any kind of these kind of tables or data manually, but we create the database. What if you need one more database in the same database instance? Can I create a new database? Create database, right click, and you can give some name, database 2 or database 3. But the problem is in a single instance, if you're creating multiple databases, it has a very less CPU, right? The performance will goes down. If you need in that way, you have to allocate more CPU and more RAM, and then you can create multiple databases in the same database instance. Okay, all right. So this is how you can create a database. In the tomorrow session, we can check the backup process. Like we will verify that automated backup will be created tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. or not. And we will delete some data from the table and we will restore the tables using the automated snapshot. And then we will create a manual backup and we will use that manual backup to restore the data. We will verify both automated snapshots and manual snapshots. And then we have to see another type of a recovery method called point-in-time recovery. Okay, so without completing the automated snapshot recovery and manual snapshot recovery, you cannot understand the point-in-time recovery. So mostly tomorrow completely about the backup creation and backup restoration process. Okay, after that we will go with the multi-AG deployment. How it is completely different and how it works. Because in the multi-AG, we have 2 different subtypes available, multi-AG cluster and multi-AG instance. Both the things we will cover. Those are not free tier eligible anyways. Okay, right. So before closing the session, are you guys clear as of now or any questions? Okay, so if you guys are clear, let us stop the session and let us continue tomorrow.